it's going to take longer. Now we are ready to go live. Good morning, Sharlene. How you doing, dear?
Good morning, Victor. I'm really great. Thanks. Lovely to be here with you.
We are, as always, here at Metropolitan trying to add value to the international community. And I'm really excited about our conversation today because when you and I chat, they're always deep, they're profound, they're about relationships, they're about love, they're about sex, they're about intimacy. And you handle them all with such aplomb, such grace, in particular subjects that I think many people, especially in my family, would have deemed it to be taboo. These are not things to be discussed, and yet they're very important. They have huge implications for a powerful, rewarding relationship. And when I speak to you, I was like, that's why I love talking to Sharlene. I walk away from our conversations feeling empowered, optimistic for the world. And anyway, I'm going to let you introduce who you are and what you do very quickly, if you can do that. And then we'll jump into some of the questions that I have for you.
Great, thank you. Well, I'm not quite sure how to respond after that introduction. Thank you very much. That's beautiful. And I always love talking with you too, Victor, in addition to how much fun it is. There's always very often a dance move thrown in between our conversations, which I enjoy. So yeah, I'm an Australian and I live in Barcelona. I've been here for 14 and a half years. I'm actually Spanish now as well. I got my residency 2 years ago. And I am a relationship and intimacy coach. And I got into this probably really because I've always actually been fascinated in relationships. And as a young child, I would have people much older than me coming to me for relationship advice. It was a strange thing, never really quite figured out why. But then when I started having my own relationships, I remember one that I had that was, I met a guy in a bar, if you remember when those days used to happen. And we had a really deep connection and we fell deeply in love and it was fun. It was really joyful and playful. And we once drove 16 hours to have dinner with friends in a different part of the States that I was living in at that time, and then had dinner and turned around, drove back. That was the kind of spontaneous life we had. Wow. But things kind of went wrong. We didn't handle things like adults. We didn't communicate things that should have been communicated. We said things that we shouldn't have said to each other. And even though I felt like, this was something that could go for a long time or forever, when I had the opportunity to take a job and leave, I took it because I realized that, there's more to a relationship than just love. And so that's kind of there's been a lot of journey since then. But my role as a relationship coach, or what I do, is I support couples to really make their relationships worthy of the love that they feel for each other.
That's fantastic. What a great summary. Let's jump right into it because you're actually leading into my question that I have for you. And that has to do with, say, what are some of the challenges, some of the frustrations that couples have to deal with and they encounter, and then they turn to an expert like you? What are the most common challenges?
It's really beautiful. I love this question, actually, Victor, for several reasons. Well, a couple of reasons. One is that there are so many commonalities in what people struggle with, and couples often are afraid to reach out or don't reach out for help because they think they're alone in their challenge. They think that that it's very relationships and intimate relationships feel very, very personal. And so it's really important, I think, for people to recognize that everybody has similar problems. How they show up for an individual couple is very different, and how they resolve it is going to be very different because all people are not the same. And so there are the common challenges and things can do. And, when you call me an expert, I like to think of myself as somebody who co-creates with my clients, because I don't know who they are. I don't know their relationship, and everybody's different. So whilst there's some commonalities, I consider myself to be someone who can sometimes see things from a different perspective, or share things or help shed light on something in a different way. And then the couple, I'm not an expert on them or who they are. We develop that together. So a lot of the common challenges, particularly living in Barcelona, is that there's a lot of interracial marriages, intercultural relationships. And so there's often the challenges of family issues. But having said that, addressing those things is no different from a couple in a way that come from the same culture, because when we all have different cultures inside our families. We all have different cultures inside, I even look at my siblings, and we all live very different lives, even though we came from the same family and had the same ways of doing things. I look at my sisters and my brother, and we have completely different ways that we live our lives now, with a different culture inside each of our relationships. So there's all of those factors there. The big one is communication. People struggle with, especially if they've been together a long time, repetitive arguments, common patterns in the way they communicate that they just get really stuck in. There are challenges with managing life in general. So inside relationships, we all have lots of life stages that we go through, and we often don't pay attention to or give importance to how much those life stages impact on ourselves and our relationships. So helping to normalize in a way some of the challenges that people have around, when there's a new baby in the house and you're not getting sleep, or the normal thing that happens that, perhaps there's not as much sex at that time or desire in those moments, or when you've got, teenage kids in the house, or when you're looking at retiring and what the future's going to look like, or kids are leaving home. So there's often a lot of life stage issues that people have that they don't recognize as life stage challenges. But certainly on the whole, also things like loss of intimacy and sex are massive ones for couples, because that happens very, very easily. Sorry, go.
You're touching on a lot of things that are hitting home for me. I've always thought I was, even though lifelong Republican, social Democrat, and now full-time Democrat, anything against Trump. But the way you succinctly put, there's a lot of life stages, and I don't think I ever truly appreciated that. I think it was on the back of my mind, but as I have to confess, I'm going through what I would deem to be a really beautiful era with my wife. But it's not without its challenges, as you say. I always knew about the change, about the importance in the effect of perimenopause. Cerebrally, I knew it, but it was one of these things you just don't discuss it in my family. My mom never discussed it. My sister would never discuss it. And it just started to dawn on me and perhaps even my wife, that we need to start addressing this, because we're starting to see perimenopause occurring in much younger stages than what we thought used to be. And it's better to handle these things head on, because of so many different, there's physiological and biological things that are happening to a body, and the woman's body is far more complex than I think the man's are. Maybe it's overly simplistic, but small changes in hormones can have huge ramifications in their sleep, in their headaches, in their fatigues, their inability to focus. And so this sounds like COVID. No, it's not COVID. Every woman's going through this. And at some point or another, it doesn't affect all women the same way. And so it's kind of hard. And if you are an only child, like my wife, she doesn't have siblings to talk about this with. And so right now, it's interesting that you were mentioning different life stages and what we like and what we don't like. I guess intimacy has never really been a huge challenge for us, but we show it in different ways. It's not just sex. So if I can share one personal thing that's not too personal. Last week, we addressed the fact that we're working too hard, my wife and I, and we're not making time for each other. And the reason that we love doing the work at Metropolitan is because it forces us to work together. And yet, she's very focused on the editorial side. I'm very focused on strategy and sales. And we come home and we work till 1 or 2 in the morning every night. And like, this can't be right. Otherwise, we need to do a different business and get rid of this and do something else. And then we said, you know what, let's just do, my wife came up with this. I'm lucky I have a wonderful woman who is not subject to the whims of the hormones, or people call you a Latin American thing. What do you call it? Character, ups and downs. She's actually very stable, extremely introspective. She always wants to know how and what is driving her emotions, her needs, her how she looks at the stuff. And I'm always learning from her how to be more in control of my own thoughts and emotions. What's important with my values? Am I being consistent with my values? And when we decided, actually, she suggested and completely agree that we should start thinking of things. For example, take tonight is the day. We decided one day is just for us, no phones, no TV, and we just decide allocate 2 or 3 hours to each other, and we have to come up with 2 things that we're going to do that do not involve sex, and then we will choose either from what I offer or what she offers, and we just spend time together. And so I think we're going through a really nice episode in our relationship, notwithstanding some pretty big changes. And one of the questions I wanted to ask you is, we have all these tips and tricks on social media on how to have a great relationship. There's some really fantastic stuff on YouTube. But sometimes, when is it the right time to start looking for a relation and intimacy coach? When things are great, or when things are already so bad that how do you repair them when things are not well? So I'll start with that one. What is the best time to look for somebody like yourself?
First of all, thanks for sharing that stuff, because I think it's really important. I find conversations out there about relationships seem to be either about how awful everything is, and let's just talk about how awful everything is and how awful my partner is, or how awful I am, or where we don't want to talk about it at all. So I really love what you're sharing, because it really speaks to what I'm passionate about, which is supporting couples to find those things that work. What are the solutions, rather than how do I either change the other person or have someone listen to me slag off my partner, and get agreement that I'm right about them because I've done everything I can, which I understand why people get to that, but it's not the most helpful. Not the most helpful strategy for your relationship. I think, one of the other jobs that I have, Victor, is I am a celebrant at weddings. And I always give the couples that I marry a gift certificate for a coaching session with me, because, and I remember having this conversation with a friend of mine who's also a wedding celebrant, and I'd asked her before I became one, would you be willing to perhaps give a voucher to them for coaching? I was trying to find a way to sort of expand my network of people looking for support, and she was horrified. She said, "Why would I do that? Why would I suggest that they might need help?" And, and I think that kind of, for me, summed up the attitude we have to getting support for an intimate relationship. And in fact, I find people are much more happy to tell you about the therapy they went to and all the struggles they have emotionally than they are to look at their relationship, which I find super, super fascinating, really. So really the answer to your question comes from how you see what getting support means. I liken it to trying to take swimming lessons when you're in the middle of drowning is probably not the best choice. So, and I also think that we come from a bit of a background, and I know therapy is not always about this now, but it certainly has come from a thing of you wait till there's something wrong with you and then you get help for it. And I came from a background in occupational therapy, in music education for children in my past, and it's about prevention. It's about educating ourselves before we need to have something. And when you go for relationship support, when your relationship is already so stuck and you feel you've got one foot out the door, it's just so, it doesn't mean you can't sort out your relationship if you're really committed to that, but it is so much harder, and it's so much more joyful to do it as a journey together, because, you know, we were talking about those life stages, and I think the other piece to that is none of us stay the same. And to imagine that you go into dealing with menopausal symptoms when you don't have a strong way of communicating with each other, or because you've changed what you enjoy or what you don't enjoy, or you've got a new belief that, like, now you're a vegan when you used to eat meat. You know, there's so many changes that happen for us. And so a relationship needs to grow, and people need to grow, and we can either do it actively, or we can kind of let things happen to us and be forced to make changes. And so I think getting support for a relationship, it's not unrealistic or silly to do it from the very beginning, really, because it's about how can I develop the skills I need so that when those difficult times come, I'm already ready for it. Bring it on. Not, oh my God, like we're in this terrible, terrible situation. How do we fix it? It's just so much harder. It doesn't mean you can't. It's just harder. And so I think
I have two questions for you.
Yeah, please.
One, what is a wedding celebrant?
Oh, I love it. It's so funny. I love it when people ask this question, because for me, it's just so normal. Maybe it's an Australian thing. So a wedding celebrant is the person that conducts the ceremony when you're not when you don't have a priest doing it or a minister of some description. So if you're not having a religious wedding, which many people choose not to do now, and in Spain, it's quite common for people to get married in their own, do the signing of the registry in their own home country, but they want to actually do the celebration somewhere abroad. So people come here, or there's mixed relationships. So someone from the UK that's living here, they meet a Catalan, they get married, they maybe go to the civil registry office and they sign their papers there, and then they want a ceremony in a lovely Masia or a beautiful, by the beach or whatever. And so as a celebrant, I do the wedding. So it's not official signing of papers specifically, but I do the wedding vows and the talk about the couple and put the wedding together. I've actually got one coming up at the end of this month, which I'm excited about. So yeah, it's a really beautiful thing to add into my skills, actually, because I get to be at the beginning of people's relationship and then supporting people, from that process moving forward. So it's lovely. It's a lovely.
So that's what I thought it was, but I wasn't quite sure. I'd never heard that term before, so that was cool. And the second
an officiant as well. An officiant is another. I think in the US they call them wedding officiants. So
I hadn't heard that either, but okay. The other question was, how do you enroll a person or a couple into getting advice or coaching on how to keep a happy relationship? If they're at the very beginning, things are rosy, everybody's in love, there's this wonderful period where they're starting a relationship. How do you justify, like we were asking, why would you get somebody to help you if things are right now going so well? So yeah. How do you convince people about the virtues and the benefits of using your types of services when things are going good?
So first of all, I would say that I don't have a lot of people that come looking or come wanting that in the early stages. So I did have a couple, for example, that I did a wedding for, who came to me a year later with problems, and they used their gift voucher with me. So I mean, I never do any convincing of anybody of anything. People convince themselves of what it is that they need in the end, because ultimately it's about what's the desire you have, and what are the skills that you have, what are the skills that you need, what do you need to understand about yourself and each other that builds strength and trust and enables you to overcome challenges. So any of that is always about what is the future vision that you have for your relationship? What is it that you want, no matter where you're at? And as I said, I don't have a lot of people that come to me in these early stages. That's my desire. I would love that. I would just be overjoyed if someone wanted to start their relationship. You spend a lot of money on a wedding that, brings people together and is all in the excitement of it. And, what do we do then to ensure that is just the beginning of something that grows from there? So for me, it's really about what do people really want for themselves, and what do they need to learn and understand about their strengths, about what they need to build in order to have that relationship that they want in the future, and building in understanding that a relationship is not just the two of you. The relationship is all the things that are happening inside each of you, all the things that are happening around you. So a relationship is not just two people. It's also you said yourself, your work. It's the kids, it's the friendships you have, the way that you do your friendships. You can have a couple who, for example, and I see this a lot, one person is very, very sociable, and they might, for example, love to have their partner with them with lots of people. They like to share with family and friends because that helps them experience their love. The other one wants the escape with me time, and I don't want to be around. I just want the two of us together, and that becomes a conflict. Unless you understand and are willing. And in fact, in an early stage of a relationship, it's when you're much more willing to give to the other. So it's a really beautiful time to be able to start looking at, okay, what are our differences? Because in the beginning, our differences are, well, oh, we love, we're so different. It's what brings the chispe, the spark to a relationship. In fact, the differences, and it's the differences that become the problem later on, because you haven't understood and been open to how do we work with those differences into the future. So it's really less about convincing, but more about having people get, where are we now, where do we want to go, and what's that path going to look like as we navigate changes and challenges as we go through.
Wow, so many things that you say resonate, because I love going and networking. I'm actually pretty well known here in the international community. I attend as many different things as I can to meet different people. My wife doesn't want to go to an event if it has more than 5 people. And she used to be kind of, we used to run the American Society. I guess we still do. But if she could, she would unknow people. She says, I already know too many people. I want to unknow them. How can I do that? If you had an app for that, I would buy that app.
That'll explain why she didn't respond to my last message.
Well, that's more, she's just overwhelmed with work.
I'm kidding.
She's actually a huge fan of yours, particularly when we did the Working Women Week stuff, and you were willing to talk about this. I mean, it's a big cause for her, having frank discussions about perimenopause and menopause and hormone replacement therapy, and the frustrations that she gets from people who write to us to tell us that the Spanish social security system or healthcare system does not treat that one very well. It's I think chemistry-wise very simple. It's very similar to taking a contraceptive. It's just kind of a different mix-up of hormones between progesterone, estrogen, and testosterone in a form of a pill. And yet they say the attitude for many doctors, females and males, that she has found here in Spain is, you're a woman. This is part of being a woman. Just deal with it.
Yes,
and it drives us insane to hear that. And you took that subject head on. And so ever since that, she loves you. So,
I got to be honest. I love your wife's raw authenticity and directness. She's just so honest, and I love it. She just
she's not a there's no drama with Tara. You know what she's very firm but not rude. And she is what I'll get back. You said a number of things that resonated with us between the life stages, and one couple is very outwardly going. That's me, and she wants to not necessarily just stay home, but she has a circle of friends that are very authentic, and she truly values them, and she invests a lot of her time, money, emotional, I guess, investments to preserving and nurturing those relationships, and properly calls other relationships acquaintances.
Yes.
And the other ones she really nurtures and takes care of. And it can be challenging, as you said. Some of the stuff that makes it very interesting at the beginning of a relationship becomes hard to manage later on. And it's I always wondered how you do that as a coach. Because there's always I guess compromises people say need to be made, but I don't think that might not be the right attitude towards it. It's truly understanding. If you truly love somebody, you make a commitment. And if I needed to change my stuff, I will change for Tara. And it frustrates me to see some of my friends not be as committed to that relationship as when they say that they really love that person. And I don't understand why they don't. And I say that, I've always also been surprised by so many friends who, mostly male friends, who's told me that they got hit by surprise by their wife who wanted a divorce. And I said, you know what? I don't ever want that to happen to me. I'm going to make sure my communication is fantastic, blah, blah, blah. And I was doing that. And guess what happened to me, Sharlene? I got notified that my ex-wife was really unhappy, and she was depressed, and she wanted a separation and divorce. I had no idea where the hell that came from. Yes. And so, it was by that time we did try to go to some therapy, and it was, for me, I didn't really have an issue. I didn't have a problem. She wanted to be out. She had some other personal stuff that she needed to deal with. But by then, I think the frustrations are so bad. They still are not good. But what I don't want is drama in my life. And the ability to allow others to dictate how you feel about people who you love is shocking to me, but it happens all the time. So anyhow, this is really about you, not my experiences. What do you think are
your experiences are good? It's great, Victor, because at the end of the day, this stuff has got to get talked about. I think it's important to talk about these things and to look at, there's either, I find a couple of things happen. Sometimes I notice that there is a looking for, that's like me. Like when you describe this, I can say to you that your experience is not uncommon, that it is very common, and this might be controversial what I'm about to say, but I'm going to say it anyway. I'm hoping that this will land in a way that I'm intending it, because this is not any criticism of anybody, because that's not what I do. But there is men quite often are satisfied more easily with what is in front of them. Now, I don't mean that they don't have desires for things, but often you'll be taught. There's a lot of men that I speak to, and they're like, it's fine, everything's fine, and their wife leaves them all of a sudden, and they're left shell-shocked, and it happens because there's a multitude of reasons for why that happens. So I'm not going to pretend to say this is a simple solution. And this is the part about coaching that I love, because it's an investigation with any couple. This is about what's happening here. There's no one trick pony here. Both couples need to grow in this. And sometimes it is that a woman is not being clear about what her wants and needs are. Sometimes the way she asks for what she wants and needs triggers a man's desire to shut down, because he has a communication style of what I call the turtle, where if your emotions are too much, you get too much, and you may not even notice that it's that, because some men are not very comfortable in noticing their emotions, or not trained to do so, or they're just subtle experiences of emotions, which I like to call it. That their way of setting a boundary for that is to go inside their shell. That's just a communication style, which is helpful because it's setting boundaries. It's not helpful with what's happening here. And so there is this thing. So it can be that a woman's, expressing it, or it's triggering that. Like, there's all sorts of beautiful things to explore in there about what's happening. And women very often then get to that perimenopausal stage, which is a whole hormonal shift and lots of different things going on, and often an exploration of, what do I want in my life now? It's kind of part of the journey of becoming a mature, wise woman. And it may not show up so obviously, because often we're struggling with all the other things that are going on, but there is this underlying thing of, what do I want in my life? And women often look at their relationships and go, I'm not getting what I want here. I'm gone. And that's why it's so important to be preparing for these times, so that you can have a way of talking about these things and communicating, so that it doesn't get to that point. But it is very, very common that, and it's not saying that a man's not doing everything that he thinks that he can do for a relationship, but you can be doing things that are not what's needed, and that's the exploration part.
That's really interesting. One of the reasons in my personal experience, in why I was more and more convinced I wanted to be with Tara, is that when I went through my divorce, funny enough, she was going through hers, and mine was horrible. It was nasty, it was aggressive, it was antagonistic, and I still don't have a good relationship with my ex-wife. And I knew Tara's husband, and when they were going through it, I saw two people who were as committed as you could possibly be to being kind to the other one.
Yes.
Fully cognizant of the death of a marriage that's taking place. And they were so nice to each other. In that moment, I'm thinking, why are you leaving? Why are you allowing this relationship to die when you're both being very nice to each other? And, actually, I don't know. Honestly, I don't remember if it was Tara. Tara said it, but I think it was also her husband, something to the effect of, when you've invested so much time in a relationship and you love somebody, and now you know it's going to end, why would you take drastic steps to make it a nasty experience? They've been kind to you, and it's already sad, but then, as watching, as a standby witness of Tara's divorce, I was like, well, this is the type of person that I would like to be with. So when things are tough, that's I guess the quintessential essence of a person. Not when things are easy and you get things done, whether it's a business or a marriage. It's how do they react in times of crisis and in times of stress. And I said, this is somebody who I know will have my back, whether it's a friend, because we hadn't gotten really into a romantic relationship. This is somebody who I can trust to be with me and has my back whenever I need it. And so when you're talking about these things, I was turning to the internet to see, what can I do to improve my wedding, make it not so acrimonious with my ex-wife. And man, there's a lot of bad information out there on the internet, or easy advice, sound bites. Can you talk about some of the challenges and pitfalls of taking advice from social media, or just in general, people who are you listen to your friends? Man, our friends had horrible advice. So can you talk about that?
Yeah, I have my own personal struggles with social media around this, because there's the call for what people want to read and what people want to see and what they want to hear, and then there is, for me, how do you apply those things? So because of the fact that there are tips and tricks, there are things like the basics of a relationship. You said it yourself, spending time together. You have no idea how many couples I speak to who say, oh no, we don't have any time for each other at all. But we really have problems with our intimacy and communication. Yeah, of course you do, because you've got to spend time together if you want to build communication and trust and connection. So there are, some things that you can do. I think we're kind of in an age of just give me the thing. Just give me the thing and then it'll be fine. And
instant gratification.
Yeah. And it happens in the same with labeling. It's become a night. I'm horrified. We've now got the therapeutic diagnoses are out there. So people label each other and their partners. I knew a couple where the wife said with incredible nasty tone to her husband, with whom they have small children, you're autistic, and was like, wow, that's, you're a narcissist and you're a this and you're a that, as if the labels are going to be helpful in some way to do that. And I think we need to be really careful about protecting ourselves and our relationships from some of this stuff. And that, if you want something to change in your relationship, growth is necessary. Growth is necessary, not just, and certainly there are some beautiful little things like you shared with me just before we got on about, the little things that you do for your wife and they're thoughtful little things that you do that she really loves, and the things that she doesn't appreciate, like cut flowers because she'd prefer a plant, not cutting, a plant to death. Those things are really important, and it's those little nuances that can be incredibly powerful. And when you try to resolve your relationship by taking a tip that's thrown out there without, it's like, it's just, I think it can be quite damaging, because also you need to understand, how does that tip actually work for us? That's a process of understanding and growth. Like, that tip is really good, but it might not work for that person. Or it might be that I have to understand that in a different way. And so this, knowledge is not power. I've said that for a long time. I know that's the idea out there, is if you don't have knowledge, there's no power. And there's a certain amount of truth to that. But knowledge alone doesn't change anything. It's the actions that you take and how you incorporate that into your relationship. And this labeling out on social media, everyone calling everyone a narcissist. I've worked with couples where somebody has appeared to have narcissistic tendencies, but it doesn't mean they're a narcissist. And when you start to understand, that's also not to say that it's important to recognize if you're being gaslighted and that there's narcissism and those things. It's super essential to know, when do I try to fix this relationship and when do I walk away? Of course, that's important. I'm certainly not downplaying that. But there's also a piece of, what do I need to understand about this person and myself and our interaction with each other, that might be because we all behave badly when we're triggered. We all just do. And so it's learning to understand some of those things. So I think the social media tips and tricks, they're useful, but it's also important to understand that you have to make them relevant to you and you have to take action with it. And if you're using something to bash your partner over the head with, or to bash yourself over the head with, it's not helpful, and it's not going to bring you the love and the connection and the things that you really desire out of your relationship.
Yeah, it's funny. When you have authentic conversations with some of my friends, and they acknowledge to me, but not necessarily to their partner, whether it's a man or a woman, self-sabotaging behavior and at the same time, it was cruel to the person that in theory they love. But they're not willing to be open with it because I don't know why. I see it happen more than I would like. And so when you're talking to people, how is your coaching of relationship intimacy differ from therapy?
There's a lot of crossovers, really. The difference is, of course, there's a lot of coaches and relationship and intimacy coaches that are also therapists. I'm not a trained therapist. I have studied some therapy. The particular type of coaching I did comes from therapeutic ideas and concepts. I think the biggest thing certainly from my perspective, and I know there's a lot of therapists out there that might disagree with my differentiation here, and I'm certainly open to that. As a coach, my interest, for example, is in what's happening now, and what do you want for the future, and looking at how to build the strength, look for the strengths that are in other parts of your life that you can bring in to your relationship, and start to build and build up that relationship and elevate it, and find the things that can serve you to creating that future that you want. There's a lot of therapists that do that as well. Therapy, on the other hand, has a much deeper understanding of diagnoses, for example. I don't work with diagnoses. What I do is I try to understand the behavior that is getting in the way and what needs to happen. And then if there's a lot of pain and hurt from the past, things that people need to process that is stopping them from moving forward, then therapy is much more useful. And I've had couples that I've worked with who I recognize they weren't ready for coaching. They weren't ready. They wanted to do something, but coaching requires this co-creation process and a willingness to at least move forward. And they were really stuck. And so I recommended that they get therapy help for that piece. And so a therapist is very good with going back to the past and helping heal the trauma, things like that. And I often have also couples that work with me that are also in therapy. So they're dealing with that deeper work. And then what we're doing is, what have you got now? What are the strengths? What do you want? What do you want to create and move forward from? And so it's often a really good thing hand in hand if there's a lot of trauma. But I tend to use the past stuff a lot more for what worked in the past in your relationship, rather than rehashing I'm not suggesting the therapist rehashes, by the way, but often that's people come to me wanting to rehash the past. And if it's because they're stuck there, then there might be therapy work to be done. But often it's more about what was working that you can bring into the now. Because even if you have an emotional experience now, if I get triggered by something from my past, the emotional trigger is still in this present moment. And so there is, what do I do with this now? And how can I heal this to move forward? And yeah, so that I'm hoping has created some clarity around that. But,
okay. Well, I have another question. So a little bit longer or complex, but what are the most surprising things that you find couples discover about each other when they're going through your coaching process? And what didn't they know about in their relationship?
This is the really fun part, actually, because often people discover that, first of all, that there are some simple things that make a really big difference. That, like, finding out what your partner likes or doesn't like is a game changer for some people. There's also the discovery of the small details that make a big difference, is something that people discover. I would also say that they discover a new way of understanding the behavior of themselves or someone else. This goes back to what I was talking about with the labeling, that often we go, well, they're just like that. And when you bring a bit of curiosity and shine a different light on it, like, for example, when I said to you about the turtle communicator. So often a turtle communicator is someone who just disappears. Like, they'll be in the middle of an argument and they walk out. That happens for a lot of couples. Or they shut down and start scrolling on social media, or they just, stop listening. And it can be men or women that do that. This is not one person or the other. Just giving it a label of going, this is actually a style of communication, and these are the strengths of that communication style, and these are the things that can get in the way, and asking people how do you relate to that? And then there's the other communication styles of, I talk about the ram and the grasshopper and the dog, and there's the positive aspects of that. And when you allow people to shine a light on that from a different perspective, it just shifts everything. It's like suddenly it's like, oh yeah, oh, I can see how that happens. Oh yeah, oh, is that what that's about? And so then that gives it, just shifting the relationship sometimes to something that's also just even a bit more playful, or giving a name to something that helps them to start to see how they can do things differently. And that's the fun stuff for me. I really enjoy that.
You got directly into the labels and I had a question about that, but I think you just addressed it. One of the other questions that I had is, what are the most important things that you think couples need to have in order to benefit from your services in terms of coaching?
Well, first of all, it's important, if you want your relationship to improve, the first thing is that you need to commit to wanting to make it work. So some people come with like, I think I want to leave, I'm not sure. That happens a lot. And if they come into the coaching space, my request is that they go all in, that they absolutely give it all they've got and commit to the relationship for the period of time that we're working together. Not one foot in, one foot out, but coming with that desire to make it happen. If at the end it doesn't, there's also, you talked about Tara's way of leaving. I've also had my own experience of that, of being able to leave in a loving way. That's also possible. But you won't know if the coaching is going to work unless you go all in. So that's the first thing. I do work with one person in the couple too, as well, because one person can make a massive difference. So it doesn't have to start with both people, which is also something that surprises a lot of people, because often therapy requires both people to be there. But a lot can change. When you change the way that you show up in the relationship, it shifts the dynamic. I always say it's like the two molecules. When one molecule changes slightly, the other one can't help but change. So there's a lot that you can do there. So they also need to understand, I guess, that it's a co-creation thing. So I'm not coming as the expert in their relationship. It's an exploration that we do together. And I guess an understanding, and it's not always, we build this, but there's the understanding that growth is necessary for both of you. You don't have to know how to do that. You don't have to know what that looks like, but just understanding the concept that this is not about coming in and you're going to change the other person. This is about, how do I shift and what do I need to learn and how do I need to grow to have the kind of relationship that I want to have. So I think those are the biggest things. And then to encourage, I always encourage people to come with as much curiosity as they can, because without curiosity, we come in with, I'm like this, you're like that, this is how our relationship is, and it's pretty hard to move forward from that if you don't have curiosity.
Well, one of the things that I found really interesting in what you said at the beginning of our conversation is something I learned more about in an interview that I watched by this guy who runs the Diary of a CEO.
Oh yes,
and
Bartlett.
Yeah, talking about how women, perhaps from an evolutionary standpoint, are more exigent or more aware of their needs as they grow older, and less or more demanding of their partner and willing to leave the relationship if they're not getting what they want. Combine that with a role of, I guess, empowering women. I don't know where it stands in terms of the impact now that women are economically independent. They're no longer as reliant on a source of income for themselves and their future, and they choose to opt out of the existing relationship to find what they need in another one. And as the stage in their life changes, their needs for another partner changes as well. And so I love that you were talking about that, because that was actually a pretty strong impact. I wouldn't say I'm concerned, but Tara's quite exigent as a person on herself and on the people who she loves, because she puts a lot into it, but she demands a lot as well. Demands not monetarily, it's investment of time, and things are changing. For example, she loves to hike. And I like doing things that make her happy, but I don't know that I want to do an 8-hour hike every week, which
Right.
she loves to do. One of the things I really enjoy about Metropolitan is I love the work. I don't mind working on Saturdays and Sundays. I don't really see it. It's not that I don't see it as work, because it always is work, but I love it. And so when I get pulled away from it so that I can be with family, to be with friends, uh, sometimes I don't know that I'm confident. I'm conscious that I am not investing time to hone the relationships with my wife or with friends or with my family. And I got to be careful with that, because in the end, that's far more important than what I'm doing with Metropolitan.
Right.
And I love that you were discussing that. But sometimes I think you're talking about people don't really realize how much they can benefit by getting a relationship and intimacy coach, even though things aren't bad. So
Right.
if things are going good, but you're more aware and sensitized to what could go wrong, you have a map for how your life might be changing. And I'd never thought that Tara would be so into hiking. It's a really
Right.
important thing to her.
Yeah.
I knew that she loved cats and animals, and she has a special ability with them, but I didn't really understand the relationship, how our cat impacts our relationship. Whether
Mm.
it has, somebody has to be there to take care of her cat, because a cat is so important to her. And if I wasn't sensitized to the importance of taking care of her cat, I
Yes.
have a serious, I totally believe it would impact my relationship with Tara.
For sure. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that's beautiful. And it's what you're speaking to, and I love what you said about this, women being more aware of their needs. It was the other piece of what I started talking about in the beginning, with, men being often quite comfortable with what they've got. They're more satisfied in a way, whereas a woman will be much less easily satisfied, and that's why that that separation often happens, with a man left going, "What the heck happened?" Um, I think any relationship, and particularly intimate ones, are important to pay attention to. And the things that you're describing, like, none of those things, there's no solution. If anyone says they've got an answer to everybody's relationship issues, I'd be a little bit suspicious, because it is an individual thing that you need to discover and continually discover together, to be able to continually put aside time to learn about each other and grow together. That it's not just a foregone conclusion that that each other so well. I don't know myself. I'm always discovering something new about myself. I'm not the same person that I was when I was 25 or 35 or even 45, without giving away too much about my age. Things have changed, and I think we know that about ourselves in some way, but we don't give credence to that, for our partners, for our relationships. And a relationship is a living organism, and it requires that attention, as you said, that you wouldn't be able to do the work that you do if you didn't have the safety and security of or you wouldn't be able to do it in the same way if you didn't have the safety and security of the loving relationship that you have, and our friendships. And that's why I said before, a relationship is more than just the two of two people, and it's a much wider thing. It's all about everything that impacts us, in the cat, our work, what we think, what we believe, who our friends are, the way we interact with our friends. We're very rich as human beings, and so are our relationships. And it is an ongoing process. It's not something that you just do once. And I have had the enormous privilege of knowing some couples who have extraordinary relationships, and they've been married for 45 years, or 35 years. And the reason that they have that is because they stay curious, because they prioritize their relationship. They make time for each other. They're curious about each other. They make sure their sex life is healthy. And those things are standard. They're the standard thing. But how you do that together, that's the growth journey. And that's the beauty of a relationship. And, also what that brings up for me, too, Victor, is this idea, because often women will leave a relationship, or men too, and say, I'm done with those, especially if you've had a lot of difficult ones or painful ones. There's this idea that I need to go and sort myself out. And I really believe that relationships are we can't learn relationship skills by ourselves. So you can go and grow in lots of different ways as a human being, but when you get back into relationships, it's going to trigger all those parts of us that it did before, maybe in a different way because you've grown. But we can only truly improve our relationships by being in relationships. And that doesn't say that if you choose not to be in one that there's something wrong with you. No, we all have our life to live, and we all have a way that we need to experience our life, and we make decisions around that. And I still truly believe that the only way to truly become good at relationships is to be in them. You can't do it outside of one by itself.
Well, Tara and I had a really powerful conversation last week, and that I've said a few things to her, and I didn't realize the impact that what I told her had on her. And it had to do with the fact that she didn't feel comfortable saying no to me on a number of things. It was going out and doing things. I told her that she's shooting down my ideas of things that we can do. And those are trigger words for her, because I guess I didn't, what do you call it? The connotation of the words that I'm using, I didn't ascribe to them that she's really shooting me down, and I'm disappointed in the fact. For example, Tara likes to plan. She's a big planner. I'm more spur of the moment. I am fully aware that if I don't let Tara know a week or more in advance of something that might come up, that she's probably going to say no, even if she wants to do it because she has planned her work or her time of intimacy or time with her cat, and she is a careful manager of her time. And so it's not that she doesn't want to do it, and it certainly isn't because she wants to shoot me down. It is because she needs to plan her work. And I didn't realize that using certain labels, you were talking earlier, trigger words, impact the relationship. And it was really hard, but she said she wanted to have that conversation with me because it could impact our relationship, and I'm not aware of it. So it's kind of to go to what you were talking about just now. But I also would like to, if you don't mind, can we talk about sex?
Baby.
You mentioned it a couple times, and we've been dancing around it. How does it show up in your coaching with couples? One person may have a higher sex drive than the other. I don't know if there's a frequency that maybe, from my mind, very toxic masculine that I might be, is that men want more sex than women. As they get older, perhaps the sex drive in women seems to diminish. But I know couples that that's not the case. So it's the other way around. Men are more, okay, let's have time and cuddle on the couch, and the sex is not so important. And the woman feels that she has needs and they're not being met. How does this manifest in your experience?
Well, I think what you've just described is exactly perfect, because there isn't a one size fits all in this. And the whole conversations around sex. So I'm always told that people don't talk about sex easily, and I don't find it very difficult to have people admit their intimacy and sex issues very quickly with me generally. I think there's how do I want to talk about this? I think the most important thing is to understand that every human being is different and every couple is different. So what is, I heard someone say the other day that there is there a standard? There was someone who was a sex therapist or something. I was listening to an interview, and she said, some people think that it's normal to have sex, like, whatever it was, twice a week, whatever, I don't remember the number now. And she said, but you have to understand that for some people, that's too much. So it's a discovery. That's why I keep saying this whole thing about relationship. It's about a growth and a discovery, and that there is no one thing. I know women who have a much higher sex drive than their partner, men who have a higher sex drive, one who doesn't want any sex at all. It's everything. And so there is this, it's the same as any other part of your relationship in a way, is how do we discover and what do we need to talk about? Because mostly conversations about sex are not had. There's a lot of limitations in what sex really is. That there is still out there a lot of people who think that sex is just penetration, and that's a very limited view of what sex is. There is also, I have had couples where they come because they're not having enough sex and intimacy, and their attempt to fix it is to try and have more sex and intimacy, or sex in that case, when in reality, there are all sorts of things around that as well. Like, what does sex need? What's the container that sex is inside of? There's trust, there's communication, there's, and what that looks like for any one person or for both people is going to be very different. And so it is always a discovery of, how do you feel? What do you need in order to have sex? Some people need planning. In fact, planning your sex life is also a very good thing to do. Although I know a lot of people go, "Oh, I don't want to plan my sex life," but if you don't plan it, you don't have it. So there's planning time for sex and like discovering new ways of viewing some of that. But what is missing? What's the conversation that needs to be had? What actually is happening? What's the experience that you're both having, and how can you communicate about that? And how can you start to explore, how to broaden your definition of sex and intimacy and what that looks like, and how can you make time for it? So I think it's really important to understand that there is no one thing for anybody, and it is, as much as any other part of your relationship, is to getting to know your own stuff. And for most of us, I certainly grew up in an era where you don't talk about this stuff. I did have parents that then I had very conservative. I grew up in a very conservative religious household with parents that suddenly in their 50s became hippies. So they went on to do these weird, very weird. It was weird back then for me, less weird now, but love, sex and intimacy workshops where they were naked with all these other people. And it was I remember it was a 7-level course, and they'd done the first 3 levels and I did the first 2. And I was so shocked by the second one that I didn't want to do the third one because I didn't know what my parents had gotten up to. But my parents are very inspiring in lots of ways for this stuff too, because they struggled a lot in their relationship, but they were always looking for we grow and learn and so on. And sex was one of those big things that they never handled. My mother died and my father still shares with me. That's another big difference. We talk about this stuff, but it was really difficult right till the end. But because there's a lot of personal things that we need to go through as well around what is sex for us, what do we allow ourselves, how can we be open to pleasure, and there's all those kind of conversations to be had, as well as how do you then do that together. In talking about all of this, I'm conscious that this can sound like it's so big, let me just forget it, but it is. I do want to come back to that there are small things and there are small tweaks that you can do that start to make a difference, that make it easier then to want to take the next steps. And growth is a forever journey. We as Tony Robbins likes to say, if we're not growing, we're dying, or anything that's not growing is dying. So having that sort of growth mindset and being able to look at what are the even small things that we can start with that can make a big difference is really powerful.
Okay. I have many more questions, but I don't want to take too much time from your day. I feel like I'm getting coaching right now, even though I'm not specifically giving you any, um, I guess, areas to work with me on. Um, and I don't want to be getting free services from you, and
Okay.
taking advantage.
Well,
But
I also want to say, Victor, what you've been sharing has been really, really powerful and very helpful. And if people really listen to the things that you're saying, not from a place of I need to do exactly what he's doing, but the idea of what you're sharing, and then how can I map that into my life? What do I need to know about my partner that I could help them feel more loved, or help them feel safer, or help them feel you know, that they can trust me. Those things are, I think what you've shared, I really appreciate and value, because it's not easy to talk about that stuff, especially. But you know, what you've shared has been really, really valuable, and I really appreciate and honor you for doing that.
well, it is it's helpful to have a partner who is so introspective. So she invests the time to understand how she engages the world, what's important to her, and then she shares them with me, and it makes me think, oh my gosh, I haven't taken the time to do that. And it manifests itself in many ways. What I eat and how I eat and why I eat it. What we like to do in bed. What I used to like to do when I was 18 is not the same as I do now.
Right.
And it's if you can't have those conversations with a person who you feel you're committed to having a life with, then you have some personal things that you need to be doing for yourself in order to fully engage with a partner. And it's not always easy to find somebody. You're an expert at getting people's confidence so that they can speak to you about these very important things that are considered taboo. And I don't really know why, because I guess I grew up in a household where we didn't speak about a lot of stuff, and yet they fostered an environment where we could if we wanted to, but they didn't do it. They didn't lead by example, but they led by encouragement, that they're open to the conversation, even though they were not comfortable to have it. And
That's
at least being open about that was helpful. Um, the idea of talking about sex with my mom, that impossible. Not because I want to do it. It's just that's just not. I mean, she has very strong gender identity and roles that I just didn't understand. But it's what you said. We're all evolving. We get to know ourselves. The empowerment of women has a role in our relationships. The children, our health, and sometimes we're not aware of some of the biological changes that are occurring in our bodies that have an impact in our sex drive or our
absolutely.
wanting to do something different. And if there's an old adage, men marry men wanting to change them, and men marry women hoping they will never change, and
And
both
that's
are dissatisfied.
yeah.
I think it's a Japanese saying. I probably butchered it, but anyhow, I just wanted to say thank you so much, because it's very valuable what you've shared. I've always loved our conversations because they're always authentic and real. And I would love to have you on to discuss more things when you have a moment. And how can people get in touch with you? How can they reach you to start to discuss whether or not they need coaching in intimacy?
Thank you. My website actually is on the bottom, sharlenehalbert.com. You can also reach out to me via email. I'm coach@sharlenehalbert.com, and I offer always a free first 1 hour session to look at understanding what it is that you want in your relationships, and a bit about what's been happening, so that we can see whether I'm the right person for you or whether there's somebody else that might be a better fit. So I always love to do those I call them clarity calls. Clarity because I get clarity on what it is you want, but very often in the calls, couples often go away with more clarity for themselves, just from the way that I ask questions and the things that they share in that call. And yes, so reach out to me either by email, or you can get in touch with me through my website to book one of those calls. And I've got an app that I'm creating that has people will have some access to courses there if they prefer to do things sort of more self-paced. So that's coming up.
Well, definitely let us know when the app's ready, because we'd be delighted to try to share that with everybody to take advantage and improve their own lives and give you some well-deserved visibility and promotion, because I think you add great value to my life and to the international community here in Barcelona. So thank you so much, Sharlene.
Really appreciate your time, Victor. Take care.
And can you stay with me? I want to chat with you after we go off the air for a quick second. Okay.
Absolutely.
Love you, Sharlene. Thank you for everything you do.